You have the clicker?
I have the clicker, yeah. Thank you so much. It's so impressive to see that huge wall of faces that you have here. So thank you for organizing these and for inviting me. So these are some little a few images from art pieces that I've done before, a lot of interactive sound installations and other kinds of things. And this is kind of where I'm heading. The rest of the talk is going to be kind of text heavy because I'm trying to jam like a year and a half of research into a short period of time, and I want to be sure I hit some of the key points. So,
Side buttons.
oh.
Next to the red thing. Yes.
Okay, sorry. So I'm going to talk to you about a think tank that I organized called Intelligence Moves, and then about the project that I'm starting now that comes out of that called the Laboratory for Embodied Intelligences. I just want to, these projects have all been really generously supported by SETI has a new artist in residence program, which was founded by Charles Lindsay, who I saw us talking here in November, and you should come to that talk because he's great. It was founded by him and Jill Tarter, a very important figure in SETI that I'll talk about a little further down. And also Montalvo, a religious artist residence program, supported me all through this time and continues to let me come up and stay with them. So Intelligence Moves set out to explore non-cerebrocentric perspectives on intelligence and subjectivity, with a deep focus on embodiment and perception, and an eye to finding relationships between small-scale movements, particularly like single-cell behaviors, and those of what we tend to call higher logics, like usually ours are the ones we call the highest logics. And so for this think tank, I invited a mix of NASA and SETI scientists, people I talked to over the course of 2015 who were interested in thinking in a multidisciplinary way, along with artists, particularly artists who use their bodies, so choreographers, dancers, wonderful opera singer, vocalist, aerialist, also arts educators who work with also different populations. I wanted to get input from a lot of different vantage points, not just the sort of normative, maybe intellectual perspective. So if you look at a quote that I like from Jill Tarter, if you look in a different way, you will find something you haven't conceived of. So the best thing that new tools do is show you the world, show you something you've never seen before. So one of my key goals in creating this think tank was to use the human body as a new tool for allow it from in a different way. So that's what would make it new and allow us to perceive then different aspects of other entities' lives than we might have before. So just to get at how you might use your body to do this, I want to talk to you a little bit about physical thinking. Some of you would know more or less about it, but I want to just hit a couple of things. So here's an example. So there's a lot that's one could take apart and edit and critique there from a feminist side, et cetera. But I wanted to talk about maybe a tiny bit that, but more, think about physical thinking. What would a neurologist or maybe a cognitive scientist have to say about what Chapman's up to there? So to look at it from a neuroscientist perspective, Rodolfo Alinas at NYU has written a lot of wonderful things, including this book, Eye of the Vortex. And there he talks about how our creative thinking comes out of gestural memory. So gesture has a really important role here. Anything you've learned to do, like brush your teeth, walk, chop vegetables, or in Charlie's case, tightening, whatever he's tightening there, using the wrench to tighten things. Anything you've done is recorded in the basal ganglia, particular groups of neurons that hold gesture memory, and he refers to these recordings as motor tapes. So these motor tapes play in your brain all the time, Not all of them at once, but like right now there's probably 2 or 3 playing in your brain. And it's the interference between those patterns that leads to creative thought. So your brain, like these basal ganglia are like a random pattern generator through the interference between these patterns. So gesture plays a really important role here. To learn a new pattern, so we see Chaplin learns this pattern that both objectifies him and his thinking and turns everything into an object, and he just starts applying it to everything that crosses his path. Not such a, I mean, this gets into some of what you're talking about, not such an optimal perspective, but a funny one. So to learn a new motor pattern then, to learn any new pattern can really open up a whole monkey barrel full of logic. So on another angle, the gesture, and again, I get excited about gesture because it's background in dance, but cognitive science has gotten me very excited about gesture too in the last 20 years. So Ramachandran, who's a neuroscientist but also deeply involved with cognition, talks about a part of the brain called the angular gyrus, and that it's a structure in the brain, and it allows the shuttling of information between 3 senses: the visual, the sonic, and the gestural. And just by virtue of its physical structure and the fact that it does this, he feels like this is why we are able to abstract things, and this kind of abstraction between these senses is the sort of the fundamental requirement for abstraction. It allows, like this structure, the angular gyrus, allows for a sort of intermediate abstraction. So we are all naturally synesthetic in this way. We can extract a pure pattern from any of those impulses, gestural, visual, or sonic. So he proposes that the cross-activation of these 3 regions of the brain is the springboard for abstraction of many kinds, language in particular, but all kinds of abstract logics. So here's gesture playing an important role again, and here's just a funny little example. I'll hide it for a minute. So there's a Martian alphabet he talks about, and I'll show you 2 symbols in it. So one of them looks like this, and then the other one looks like this. So that second one of them is called Uba, and one of them is called Kiki. So what do you think that second one was called? Kiki. And so wherever you go in the world, the interesting thing is it doesn't matter what your native language is. People will, unless they're just pulling your leg, will say this is Kiki and this is Uba. So here you have, both the gesture that I'm making, the form that you visualize when I do it, and the sound. Like there's an example of this kind of abstraction. So, so thinking back to, so here we have gesture in this important role. So thinking back to the way Chaplin sort of abstracts that new logic, how might our logic change if we could take on the behavior of other creatures? So that was my excitement, interest in organizing this think tank. Could we come to understand other creatures' intelligences by trying them on our bodies? And so it's a weird contradiction. How can we think more anthropocentrically by using our own bodies to do it, but using our bodies and our senses to try to take on those senses and perspectives of other creatures? Because our bodies, the physical, the way we think is so physical. So this is one of the experiments we did in the think tank. So it was, Intelligence Moves was an experiment in how we might consider, yes, as I said, intelligence in different creatures by using our bodies as tools, together with also scientific readings and research. So I wanted to bring together that kind of hard research with this new approach. And the scientists were very interested in this. It offered an opportunity for scientists to engage with artists and to leverage that kind of physical thinking, bodily thinking, to consider things from a range of perspectives. So why look at microbial behaviors? What's so exciting about those if you're thinking about intelligence? First of all, as I'm sure plenty of you know, everything that is alive on this planet evolved from microbes. So all the perceptions and communication systems that are in use in plants and animals and us have evolved, are built upon the capacities that were given to us by microbes. So there's nothing in here that we didn't get from those guys. So meanwhile, Lakoff and Hansen have written, this is maybe it's 10 years old already, Philosophy of the Flesh, that talks a lot about the recent work in cognitive science, where the whole idea of reason has been hugely shifted because of research. So there is no more like rational thinking. All this rational thinking is in fact built on the physical scaffolding of our movement and our physical perception. So the very paths you take in your brain to think are first carved out by learning gesturally. I mean, people with kids know this to some extent, but it's startling to what degree that plays out. And I don't have time to go into that now, but I'm happy to talk about it later, but you'll just have to trust me that, like, so many aspects of your logic, your seeming logic, come out of, I mean, one quick example is there's a test where they have two groups of people take a test, and one group steps back and takes it, and the other group steps forward. And the group that steps back, and it doesn't matter where they're from, always do better. Because of this sort of, and the thinking is, this has to do with a kind of animal sense of like, I've been in this place before, I feel comfortable here. I go here, it's a little bit unknown. It's enough to make you want to feel uncomfortable. But particularly from a Western background, from this background where we say, we have this idea of taking perspective, stepping back, that would also layer that and give it more weight. So, but the whole, all of our logic and even our grammar is riddled with these kinds of things. So, if the structure of our reason is created by these same mechanisms as our perceptions and our gestures, and these mechanisms have evolved from microbial behaviors, I feel I'm interested to see, is there anything, can we find parallels between microbial behaviors and ours? What will we see if we look at them together, if we try to take them on? And might we find that we're not as superior as we thought? I'm curious to find that out. Some researchers have already made concrete discoveries in this regard. Lori Marino, who's done a lot of really great work on primate intelligence and whale and dolphin intelligence, also has worked with microbes and has found that all mobile unicellular organisms, all of them, possess the fundamental characteristics of nervous systems. So right there in a single cell organism is what is needed to think. So can we really be sure that the cognitive capacities and the modes of reasons that we think are so special to us because of our neurons aren't shared in some way with these unicellular creatures? And then, as I mentioned, Linus, who I mentioned before, he also has written about the simple irritability of single cells being the seed of subjectivity. That simple, like, move towards what you need or away from what's toxic is, if you think about it, like that's kind of the fundamental move of subjectivity. I mean, you can even take it down further and say, well, maybe electron attraction, repulsion would be the fundamental move of subjectivity, but it's just fun to sort of look around this area. And again, the scientist found this interesting too. So, so Avani Basler, you may have heard about, who's done a lot of research in microbial communication, because if you're not aware, they do communicate in varying degrees of sophistication. But she's found not only do they speak one language, they speak multiple languages, so they talk to each other within their own species, but they also have, there's a kind of bacterial Esperanto that allows them to communicate with all kinds of unknown bacteria. Eshel Ben Yaakov did some really interesting work and made some interesting claims that some people certainly puts that don't take to them, and some people find them fascinating, but he talks about like syntax in these communications among bacteria, pointing to the fact that if bacteria emit chemical or receive chemicals, say in order A, B, C, that would mean one thing. If it comes in B, A, C, that would mean something else. So that is, in a nutshell, syntax, the order of things changing their meaning. But it gets more complicated, more sophisticated than that, where, let's say some of the bacteria, if a bacteria, they do this quorum sensing that you may have heard of, and it's kind of like what ants do. So one bacteria will go out as a scout to try to find food, and come back with a report, a chemical, that report being a chemical that it emits, and that gets given to the next bacteria, who then responds to that. And if it thinks it's food, if the chemical said, yeah, that was food, and the next guy reads it and agrees, yes, that's food, he puts it out too. So as each member of the colony agrees that's food, the level of that chemical rises. So it's a chemical voting that they do. And it's a very democratic voting. So when the number reaches a certain level, either the majority of that group or just a percentage, then they decide, yes, that's food. But if the scout came back and gave wrong information, whether he lied or made a mistake, or as Benyakov says, cheated, which is a little exaggerated but fun, if this guy cheats, then the other bacteria have the capacity through gene swapping, or what the horizontal gene transfer, to change their language like that, so that then this guy can't understand anymore the language. So he's ostracized like 100%. So there's a lot of sophisticated stuff that goes on, and a lot more work that needs to be done. So these are all some of the reasons why I'm interested in working with microbes. Also, that they have been talking, they've been evolving and surviving for now. The number keeps going up. Now it's 3.8 billion years, according to most recent fossils. So I think if they've been communicating all this time, there must be something we could learn from the fact that the development of their languages, which we could see by sampling different bacteria, and the fact that they've succeeded, where we certainly have not. There are many, I would guess no jury would think we're going to last that long. So also that the astrobiologists at SETI and NASA that I met all agree that the life we will find when we go out in space will be predominantly microbial in nature. They're just much hardier, and small things can survive much more easily in all kinds of environments. So that's who we're going to meet. So if that's who we're going to meet, and that's who we're trying to listen to, why not take the opportunity here on Earth to see what kinds of intelligence they might have, so we could understand ahead of time how we might communicate with these other guys. So there's a lot of different angles, sort of, that I find interesting that are in play. Oh yes, and then lastly, right here and now on your very own body, on it and in it, there are 100 times more microbial DNA than human DNA. So you're really like 1% human. You're 100%, I'm sorry, 99% microbial. So that's kind of makes you wonder, like, who's really in charge. On top of that, like, the vast majority of those microbes are in your gut, where there's what they call the enteric nervous system, or some people call the second brain. And that brain is talking to this one, and it has a lot of control over this one, like the moods, your ability, your memory, all kinds of things. It can make it possible or impossible for you to think. So maybe the microbes are playing a larger role in our lives than we think. So we used at the think tank dialogue and debate, along with a range of performing arts techniques, to sort of shuttle scientific and conceptual logics back and forth. So activities range from presentations on astrobiology, panels participated in by multiple scientists with different specialties, and which there was different. Some people agreed, didn't agree whether microbes might be intelligent, or whether that language might have syntax. So we would sort of attack that from a lot of different angles. And then we would also do movement and vocalization experiments to try to take on some of the features of quorum sensing in our own bodies, which really does help allow you to think in some new ways and to communicate in new ways. And we're developing those exercises more and more, and that's what's leading into the next projects, which I'll tell you about. So, so why would we want to try on these behaviors? Why do these vocal and movement exercises to try on quorum sensing? So, just as I suggested before, if we could try on this key human faculty, physical thinking, which according to cognitive science is 95% of our thinking, if we can try on microbial physical thinking, we might be able to construct some logics. They might naturally be constructed on our own bodies, and we could get, so it becomes a kind of telescope or microscope or a body scope to access a mindset or an embodied mindset that's different than what we have. And so what we're doing is getting into the actual facts of that. So doing exercises in swapping memes or swapping tools, the way bacteria do the horizontal gene transfer. Or we've done, I'm just going to jump through, I'll just sit on that so you can see some of the people. But we've done some interesting experiments with thinking about the cell membrane and focusing on our own porosity, which is our own sensitivity, which is much more than we realize. We have 1,000 neurons per square inch on our skin and 650 pores. So the neurons to sense, the pores to both excrete and take in. You know, you actually do breathe through those pores. So we do these, with dancers so far, and dancers are certainly more sensitive with their bodies, we do these kind of things that start out as meditations and then sort of movement projections that allow you to get more access to this kind of sensation. So that's, we're going to be doing exercises, so, and these are the artists who are there, and all these names are on my site, so I encourage you to go look there, because they're all collaborators. I mean, none of this would have been possible without them. They're the ones in them. And I won't be able to talk, I hope to cover a lot more, but that's Jill Tartar, those are the radio telescopes. And so the new project, the Laboratory for Embodied Intelligence, which is building on this, I'm excited that I was given a really wonderful residency and grant for the 18th Street Arts Center in Santa Monica, and I will, starting this fall, so right when I get back, start reaching out to the community there, and we want to work with people who have very sensitized bodies, but not just movers, you know, dancers and so on, but people who are blind, people who have movement limitations, children and elders, so that we get a range of ways of perceiving through the body. And we build up exercises. I've told you a couple of them, but you know, there will be many, many different exercises. I can show you some here, but that will allow all these minds to and bodies to sort of contribute to our understanding of how we might use our bodies differently to think, and what we can learn about microbes by trying on the behaviors. So I'll just show you, oh yeah. So some of the things we'll be trying out, I talked about porosity. We'll be looking very carefully at movement of motile bacteria, because that is a sort of a huge leap, and has been described as the seed of any kind of behavior comes out of movement. And so we'll be sort of just taking on some of those movement patterns they do, like the run and they do a sort of, it's like a walk, random walk, it's a run and tumble. So they go in a straight direction, as long as they keep sensing if it's either more of the food that they're looking for or less of the toxins that they're trying to get away from. So they do a sort of constant sensing, time-based sensing, and then when they find like they're not getting more of food, for example, then it's time to tumble. So they'll do a sort of tumble randomly and then set off in a new direction. That's our understanding, but we're learning, in fact, that they have many more like ways of sensing, and that what looked to us as random is not at all. That they have, some of them have like the E. coli have like maybe 50 or 100 of these sensors, flagella, that allow them to move, but also that sense that they can move around their body and make much more sophisticated decisions about this so-called tumble. So it's just, I don't know, it's very exciting. I'm having to sort of skirt across a lot, but I think that taking on these different behaviors will just be another way to learn from them. There is like some really nice video footage out there and so on, but to try them on and then let the community try them on, and we will also develop performances with the community, and then maybe sort of performances with primarily artists based on what we've taken and learned from these workshops. So that was a sort of quick slide through. So I'll just end with that little quote from Richard Dawkins. You push novelty of language and metaphor far enough, you can end up with a new way of seeing, which can maybe make an original contribution to science. If not, we'll at least, I think, aesthetically be stretching our minds and bodies, and hopefully those of the people who participate in watching. And there's the thank yous. So.